The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting harsh shadows across the sterile waiting room where Marcus Williams pushed his mop bucket, with the same gentle precision he used to braid his 7-year-old daughter's hair each morning. 23 years old, broad shoulders bent from countless nights spent scrubbing floors after Lily fell asleep. He moved through the hospital corridors like a ghost, invisible to most, essential to all. His calloused hands, stained permanently with industrial cleaner, told the story of a man who had traded his dreams of engineering school for the crushing reality of single fatherhood. When Lily's mother walked away without a backward glance. But, on this particular Tuesday evening, as autumn rain drummed against the hospital windows, Marcus would discover that sometimes the smallest acts of humanity can shift the entire axis of someone's world. The pediatric wing was unusually quiet when Marcus heard it, a sound that pierced through his practiced indifference like glass. Somewhere beyond the reception desk, a child was crying with the raw, desperate intensity that only comes from true terror. Not the manufactured tears of a scraped knee or a denied candy bar, but the soul-deep sobbing of someone whose world was crumbling. That Marcus paused, his mop dripping onto the freshly cleaned floor. 3 years of working night shifts had taught him to mind his own business, to clean around the drama and dysfunction that filled these halls. But this cry was different. It reminded him of Lily during those first terrible months after her mother left, when nightmares would tear her from sleep and send her scrambling into his arms, seeking the safety that only a parent's love could provide. Following the sound, Marcus rounded the corner to find a little girl, no more than 6 years old, pressed against the wall beside the elevator bank. Her designer clothes, a pristine white dress that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, were wrinkled and tear-stained. Her dark hair fell in perfect ringlets around a face streaked with mascara, and her small hands shook as she pressed them against her ears, trying to block out whatever demons were chasing her through this sterile maze. The waiting area was empty except for a woman in an expensive business suit, her phone pressed to her ear as she paced near the windows. She was speaking in rapid, heated tones about stock prices and board meetings, seemingly oblivious to the child's distress just 20 feet away. Marcus glanced around, expecting to see anyone moving to comfort the girl, but the nurses were busy behind their station. The woman continued her phone call, and the few other visitors were absorbed in their own private anxieties. The child remained alone in her terror, invisible despite her obvious need. Setting his mop bucket aside, Marcus knelt beside the girl, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice carrying the same gentle tone he used when Lily woke from bad dreams. "What's your name?" The girl looked up through tears that made her eyes seem impossibly large. "Sophie," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hospital's ambient noise. "That's a beautiful name," Marcus replied, reaching into his pocket, where he always kept a small bottle of bubble solution, a habit left over from Lily's toddler years, when bubbles could cure any crisis. "You know what, Sophie, I bet you've never seen hospital bubbles before." He twisted off the cap and dipped the small wand, then began blowing gentle streams of iridescent spheres into the sterile air. The bubbles caught the harsh fluorescent light and transformed it into something magical, floating between them like tiny planets in their own private galaxy. Sophie's sobbing began to quiet as she watched the bubbles drift and pop. One landed on her nose, and despite her tears, a tiny smile ghosted across her lips. "My daddy used to blow bubbles," she said quietly, reaching out to touch one before it burst against her fingertip. "Before he got sick." Marcus felt his heart clench, the weight in her voice. The way she spoke in past tense, he recognized the grief that children carry differently than adults, more purely, and therefore more painfully. "Tell me about your daddy," Marcus said, continuing to blow bubbles as he settled more comfortably on the floor beside her. "He's really sick," Sophie said, her voice gaining strength as she watched the bubbles dance around them. "The doctors use big words I don't understand, but mommy cries when she thinks I'm not looking. She's been on the phone all day with work people, and I know she's scared too, but she won't talk to me about it." Marcus glanced toward the woman on the phone, understanding now flooding through him. Not indifference, but her own kind of panic, the desperate need to control something, anything, when the most important thing in your world is spinning completely out of reach. Sometimes grown-ups forget that kids need to talk about the scary stuff too, Marcus said, blowing a particularly large bubble that made Sophie giggle despite everything. "When my little girl gets scared, we make up stories about where the bubbles go when they pop. "Where do they go?" Sophie asked, momentarily distracted from her fear. "Well," Marcus said, his voice taking on the storytelling cadence that never failed to captivate Lily. "Some people think they just disappear, but I think they float up to a special place where all the wishes live. Every time you make a wish on a bubble before it pops, it carries that wish up to the wish keepers." Sophie's eyes widened. Really? Want to try it for the next 20 minutes? Marcus blew bubbles while Sophie made wishes for her daddy to get better, for her mommy to stop crying, for the scary machines to be quiet. With each popped bubble, her breathing became steadier, her tears dried, and something that looked almost like hope began to return to her eyes. The woman on the phone, Sophie's mother, had ended her call and was now watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. Marcus caught her eye and saw something there that looked like gratitude mixed with surprise, as if she couldn't quite believe that a janitor in a faded uniform had succeeded where she had failed. "Sophie," the woman approached slowly, her heels clicking against the linoleum. "The doctor wants to see us now." The little girl's face immediately tensed again, but Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Hey, remember what we said about the bubbles?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "I want you to take this with you," Marcus said, pressing the small bottle of bubble solution into her palm. "Whenever you get scared in there, you just remember that somewhere, all your wishes are floating around, waiting to come true." As Sophie and her mother walked toward the elevators, the woman turned back. "Thank you," she said simply. But Marcus could hear volumes in those two words. 3 days later, Marcus was surprised to find an envelope waiting for him in his employee mailbox. Inside was a check that made his hands shake. Enough money to pay off his student loans, catch up on rent, and maybe even start that college fund for Lily he'd been dreaming about. But it was the note that brought tears to his eyes. "Dear Marcus, Sophie's surgery was successful. When she woke up, the first thing she asked for was her bubbles. The doctors said her positive attitude throughout the procedure was remarkable. They'd never seen a child so calm and hopeful during such a difficult time. You gave my daughter something I couldn't, the belief that magic still exists in dark places. I've been so focused on managing the crisis that I forgot to simply be present for her fear. You showed me what real strength looks like, not in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the willingness to kneel beside a scared child and blow bubbles until the world makes sense. Again, I've established a scholarship fund in your name at the local community college. It's time for you to chase those dreams you put on hold. Some people change the world through grand gestures, but you've shown me that the most profound changes happen in small moments of human connection. Thank you for reminding me what matters most. Victoria Chen, CEO Chen Industries and more." Importantly, Sophie's mom. 2 years later, Marcus walked across the graduation stage in his cap and gown, his engineering degree finally in hand. In the audience, Lily cheered wildly beside Victoria and Sophie Chen, who had become unlikely family friends. Sophie, now healthy and radiant, was blowing bubbles in celebration, each one carrying wishes for Marcus's bright future. As Marcus looked out at the faces of people who had believed in him, he thought about that night in the hospital corridor when a simple bottle of bubble solution had changed everything. He had learned that kindness is never wasted, that the smallest gestures can create the most profound transformations, and that sometimes the very act of seeing someone's pain and choosing to respond with love is enough to alter the trajectory of multiple lives. The bubbles Sophie blew that day drifted up toward the auditorium ceiling, carrying with them the wishes of a janitor who became an engineer, a scared little girl who found courage, and a mother who remembered that success isn't measured in dollars, but in the moments when we choose to lift each other up. In a world that often feels harsh and indifferent, Marcus Williams had proven that heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear janitor uniforms and carry bubble solution in their pockets, ready to create magic for anyone brave enough to believe in the power of human kindness.